Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Plattwoods Church. My name is Evie Martin. I'm the lead pastor here. It's good to be gathered together here in this space, but also a special welcome to those of you worshiping with us online today. Over the course of the last couple of years, millions of people the world over fell in love with Kansas City's own Jason Sudeikis as he captured our hearts in the role of the hit TV series Ted Lasso. Not everyone has seen it, I know, but I blazed through the first 2 seasons as fast as they came out, and then the 3rd season came out, which we all knew would be the last, and I dragged my heels to get to the end. I just watched the final episode a few weeks ago because I didn't want the best series I'd seen in years to come to an end. If you haven't seen it, you might still know the premise of a Midwestern University football coach getting picked up to coach European football, Team AFC Richmond, mostly as a joke. Everyone expects him to fail, to implode the club, to bring disappointment to everyone, but Lasso is true to himself and to his values, and he focuses not on the game, but on the team. The rest is the unfolding of 3 seasons of goodness and kindness, real human stories, and lots of laughter. One poignant moment in the first season took the internet by storm when Lasso goes up against the owner of a rival club in a game of darts. In an endearing monologue about his childhood and his adolescence, he recounts how he had learned that there's more to be gained when you come up against someone you don't understand or who doesn't seem to get you, if you choose to be curious, not judgmental. Be curious, not judgmental. He offers up the example that his opponent in this game of darts seems to have made a judgment about him, that he's nothing more than a country bumpkin from the wheat fields of Kansas with no real competitive edge or talent to fear. Had his opponent instead demonstrated curiosity, he might have learned that Ted grew up playing darts with his dad every Sunday afternoon from age 10 to 16. And with that, he lands his final dart in the bullseye, winning the wager and putting the grown-up bully, Rupert, in his place. It's a fantastic scene. It's worth a watch, even if you haven't seen the show. Just search on YouTube for dart scene, Ted Lasso. It's a great scene. But that central quote, "Be curious, not judgmental," is really a whole sermon in and of itself. We could just leave it on the screen for you to think about and internalize for the next 15 minutes and call it a day. But I'm going to try to earn my keep for the week, so I'll expound on it a little bit more. This month in our sermon series, we're exploring the values that center us, that guide us, that ground us, that we want to be known by as a community of faith. And last week, we talked about our value of belonging, of committing to be a place and a people where anyone can belong as the person they are, because that is how Jesus approaches people. It is how God embraces all of us. This week, obviously, we dive into our value of curiosity. Curiosity might be a great value for Ted Lasso, for scientists, for artists, for individuals as we navigate this wild and unpredictable world. But why would we name curiosity as a value for a community of faith, for Plattwoods United Methodist Church? We name it every Sunday, first thing as we gather. Some of you have even started to pick up on the cadence of what we say in our welcome. If this is your first time here at Plattwoods Church, we want you to know that you are welcome here with all of your questions, your curiosity, your struggles, your celebrations. We say it intentionally. We say it over and over because we mean it. We believe it's important for people to hear a church say that it's okay to ask questions and to be curious. And I'll share 3 reasons that I think curiosity is important for us as a church. There are more, but these 3 are a good place to start. First of all, curiosity shapes us in humility and wonder. This is back to school season. We just celebrated and blessed our kids and teachers and administrators as the cycle of the school year begins once again. For those of you who perhaps spent a lot of time with kids over the summer, your own, your grandkids, your neighbors' kids, particularly the littler ones, you likely found yourself inundated with question upon question upon question about literally anything and everything. Research shows that kids between the ages of 2 and 5 ask about 40,000 questions in that span of life. 40,000. And that's understandable. They are blank slates. The world is wild and wide and new to them. The adults in their lives are the primary source of knowledge and information and explanation for them. But you know what's great about the incessant barrage of questions from kids, even if it starts to drive you a little bit mad after a while? Kids are unashamed that they don't know. They have no inkling of inferiority or insufficiency about themselves simply because they do not yet understand a thing. Instead, they demonstrate open-heartedness, open-mindedness, fascination with their own unknowing. Not knowing is okay. In fact, it is what makes every day of their lives so exciting. Kids living with joy in this posture of not knowing is a perfect model of humility for us. We have so much to learn, to remember, really, from them what it is to be humble. Being humble is not about meekness or subservience or self-deprecation. Humility that kids show us is about taking delight in not having all the answers and being unashamed to keep asking the questions. In the book of Proverbs, a collection of wisdom sayings in our Old Testament, we find a lot about the pursuit of wisdom and knowledge, how it is a lifelong practice for the people of God. And we also find this interesting little verse from Proverbs 25:2. It is the glory of God to hide something, and the glory of kings to discover something. It gives us this image of God having hidden all sorts of wondrous gifts and surprises and treasures for us throughout all of creation. That is the glory of God embedded in the world around us. And then it is our gift and our pleasure and our privilege to discover such glory. It is God's invitation to our curiosity, this treasure hunt in the world around us. And that curiosity is cultivated in the kinds of questions we ask. There's a classic book called The Little Prince, written by French author and poet Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. Many of you have probably read it at some point in your life. But here, he offers up an observation of the kinds of questions grown-ups have forgotten how to ask. Grown-ups love figures. When you tell them you've made a new friend, they never ask you any questions about essential matters. They never say to you, what does his voice sound like? What games does he love best? Does he collect butterflies? Instead, they demand, how old is he? How much does he weigh? How much money does his father make? Only from these figures do they think they have learned anything about him. Grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to always and forever be explaining things to them. Are we asking questions about figures? What's the church budget? How much am I supposed to give, supposedly, to be a good Christian? How many people come every Sunday? How much time is being asked of me? Or are we asking, what does it feel like to love my neighbor? Why aren't there any woods at Platt Woods? Can I run in the hallways? What is it like to pray with crayons? Can we sing a song I don't know yet? Does the Holy Spirit smell like fire? How can God be three and one at the same time? How does it feel to come here for the first time? A church that remembers how to ask good questions is a church that is shaped in humility and wonder about God who made us, about other people who walk with us, and about the world around us in its beauty and its brokenness. The second reason that curiosity matters for us as a church is that it counteracts the illusion of certainty. Earlier this summer, I heard a comedian here in Kansas City do a whole opening bit on her experience as a young person trying to ask questions at church and being shut down and shut out. It was hilarious to most of the audience because they either related from their own experience or, as outside observers of the church, they had no problem imagining what she was talking about. It was funny to them. It was deeply discouraging to me. I felt like jumping up and shouting, "Come to Platt Woods Church, bring your questions and curiosity, your struggles and celebrations." But that would have been weird. Her jokes were reflective of a very real thing in the church at large for a very long time. At its best, the church is a place of spiritual journey, of communal growth, of seeking and searching, gaining clarity, holding ambiguity together. But that's really hard work. And so more often, at its worst, the church becomes a place that deals in certainty. It doles out trite answers to life's complicated problems. It placates and sedates the people with a set of right answers over and against wrong behaviors, because honestly, that's easier. It's easier to control people. It's easier to be successful as a church. It's easier to grow in number because, on the flip side, so many people want the simplicity of an answer. In our human growth and development as people, certainty plays a role in how we experience the world and how we come to trust other people. We all have a need for certainty in life. We particularly feel drawn toward things that seem black and white, that seem certain in our early adulthood, often in our early to mid-20s. That's when we start to feel the bigness of the world, the unpredictability, the vastness of possibility and danger all around us as we begin to step out into it on our own. That can be terrifying. And so in that life stage, we look for stakes in the ground, anything that is certain, that will not change or send us tumbling into new realities or realizations. But as we continue to mature, we experience more and more that life just doesn't work that way. We can develop the muscles and the tools to live and adapt to ambiguity, to dive deeper into deeper levels of truth beyond this or that logic. But unfortunately, the church, in many circumstances, has offered certainty to so many young people in their faith. It has given singular answers to life's biggest and most ambiguous questions, and then it has just left us there. It has stunted our growth, our spiritual maturity, by not letting us move past that rest stop of certainty into the adventure of ongoing curiosity. The danger of certainty in a journey of faith is that once you're certain about what God is like, how God reacts to us, how God thinks, what God's judgment is, and who it is for, then there's nothing left of God to experience. You have, in essence, become God. You've reached the end of wonder and awe, and now you have no need for faith. Questions and doubt are not the opposite of faith. Certainty is. In a world where culture is serving up the illusion of certainty to us on a platter all around, certainty in political parties, certainty about how things ought to be done, certainty about entire categories of people, certainty about economic patterns, you name it, no one has left space for curiosity. No one has left room for conversation. No one takes any joy anymore in not knowing and wondering. Our world is in real danger of imploding under the weight of certainty, certainty which is manufactured. It's an illusion. It's not even real. It's a critical time for the church to remember its gift of curiosity and the tools that it provides us to draw us into someone else's story rather than assuming and writing their story for ourselves. Jesus interacted with a lot of different people in the Gospels. And it's interesting to note that the only people he ever really passes judgment on or gets agitated with are the people who are certain. Jesus gets the most mad at the people who are the most certain. Specifically, these always happen to be the religious leaders. The keepers and interpreters and enforcers of religious laws, these folks took themselves and their jobs very seriously, giving the people the answers that were right. For every question, they had an answer. There was no such thing as a Pharisee saying, I don't know. So the story I want to lift up next is an anomaly from the world of certainty, and it brings us to our last reason for curiosity in a church. Jesus invites it. Last week, we spent time in the 3rd and 4th chapters of John. I'm returning to chapter 3 again today for an introduction to Nicodemus. There was a Pharisee named Nicodemus, a Jewish leader. He came to Jesus at night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God, for no one could do these miraculous signs that you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered, I assure you, unless someone is born anew, it's not possible to see God's kingdom. Nicodemus asked, how is it possible for an adult to be born? It's impossible to enter the mother's womb for a second time and be born, isn't it? Jesus answered, I assure you, unless someone is born of water and the Spirit, it's not possible to enter God's kingdom. Whatever is born of the flesh is flesh, and whatever is born of the Spirit is spirit. Don't be surprised that I said to you, you must be born anew. God's Spirit blows wherever it wishes. You hear its sound, but you don't know where it comes from or where it is going. It's the same with everyone who is born of the Spirit. Nicodemus said, how are these things possible? Jesus goes on after that for another 11 verses after his question, how are these things possible? Unsurprisingly, not answering Nicodemus' question. I love what we see here. We see a man, a religious leader of great reputation, a person in an office who represents the certainty crowd. He's an answer man. And yet, he's got some questions. But did you notice when and how he asked them? When did he come find Jesus? At night. He doesn't want anybody to see him. Nobody needs to know that the Pharisees got questions. That would undermine whatever constructed authority he had, right? It would chip away at his credibility. He clearly has seen something in Jesus' signs and teaching that has piqued his curiosity, but he is scared to death to admit it. So he gets his questions out under cover of darkness with no one else around. How is it possible for a man to be born again? What a funny thing you're saying, Jesus. I'm trying to imagine it. It's not making sense. You notice that Jesus' response to him got more and more obtuse, right? He waxes on about spirit and flesh and the wind blowing and not knowing. Jesus doesn't give a single answer that satisfies Nicodemus' question. How can this be? John Chrysostom, who was a saint of the early church in the 300s, said that Jesus speaks to Nicodemus this way on purpose. Chrysostom writes, now it was for this reason that Christ often spoke obscurely, because he wished to make his hearers more inclined to ask questions and cause them to be more attentive. What has been said with its meaning obvious often escapes the listener, but what has been said obscurely makes him more curious and eager. You've had that experience, right? Maybe you've read words of Jesus in your Bible and had to stop and go back and read them again, and even on the third time you find yourself shaking your head going, huh, Jesus, what are you saying? I think Jesus is probably delighted when that happens. Because in our curiosity, we haven't figured Jesus out. What's the fun in that? Instead, we keep drawing closer to him, diving deeper into his story and the story that he's writing for us. What's interesting about the story of Nicodemus is that we don't know much more. He doesn't speak again in John chapter 3 after saying, how are these things possible? He doesn't forsake his Pharisee role and start following Jesus with the disciples. But we do see him again in chapter 7, The larger body of the Pharisees is trying to build a case against Jesus, painting him as a false prophet, and Nicodemus speaks up, saying not to judge him without hearing him first. And then we see Nicodemus one more time in John chapter 19, after Jesus has been crucified. In the other Gospels, we often hear of Joseph of Arimathea being the one to take Jesus' body and place it in his own tomb. But in the Gospel of John, do you know who else is with him? Nicodemus. He brings myrrh and aloe, a lot of it. And together they wrap Jesus' body in spices and linens and lay him in the tomb. Nicodemus may not be an exemplar to us of a disciple who gives up everything to follow Jesus, but he does give us a glimpse of how tightly bound his position of certainty held him, and yet his curiosity drew him to Jesus time and time again. Curiosity is important for a church because Jesus invites it, and it keeps us coming back to him. Curiosity, as a value that we hold together, shapes us in humility and wonder, counteracts the illusion of certainty in the world around us, and Jesus invites it from us. When we hold to this value and we continue to live by it, we not only enrich our relationship with God, we deepen our relationships with others too. We learn to show up differently in conversations and in confrontations. You all know the person in a group, whether in a work setting or a social setting or a church setting, who is a statement maker. They pronounce their opinion as if it is fact. They lob statements of certainty onto the table and effectively shut down the conversation. Maybe you know that person. Maybe you are that person. And we all know the person, maybe are the person, who keeps silent in relational conversations, not wanting to aggravate the statement maker, but not trusting that there is room for your question or the part of your story that you want to share. And then hopefully we all know a question asker or two in our lives. Maybe we can grow into better question askers, the ones who can hear the statement maker, a belligerent conversation stopper, and ask a question to peel back those defensive layers. The ones who notice the silence and wonder, what is it that my friend is feeling behind her furrowed brow? When we value, and we trust that others are going to value, curiosity, everyone's story has a place to unfold. And we hear the stories as people telling them to us, not as we have written them without their input. I'll close thinking specifically of an example from this past Monday. I helped Brandy Molina, our missions director, and Care Portal, one of our ministry partners, facilitate a cost of poverty experience for the staff at Southeast Elementary School, our partner school. We've hosted this same poverty experience here at Plattwoods back in February, and I talked about it a little bit back then too. But in this experience, participants simulate a month in the life of a person or a family in our community who lives at or below the poverty line. Each week is 15 minutes long, and you have to navigate transportation, paying bills, getting to work and school, buying groceries, getting your prescriptions filled, sometimes making court appearances with the limited resources that you have. It's harrowing, to say the least. Some of you know this life. It's not a simulation, it's your life. And at the end of the hour, the teachers in the room were so grateful. They reflected on how they felt during this 1-hour simulation. Their eyes were opened to the possibilities of what's going on in their students' lives that directly impacts how they show up at school, or sometimes why they don't show up at all. Every single one of the participants left the experience equipped with a posture of curiosity towards their students' stories, rather than snapping to a judgment about why Johnny is so tired and cranky, or why Sarah always seems defensive and angry, or why Paul is simply absent for a week. Curiosity takes us so much deeper into our human connection with one another than judgment does. We may be quick to judge the mom living in her car with her 2 kids because she can't hold a job, made bad choices along the way, should try harder to get help. Curiosity might reveal to us that she does have a job, Her landlord hiked up the rent on her. She couldn't afford it anymore. She's terrified she might lose her kids, and she hasn't yet been approved for food stamps. We may be quick to judge the bully in our school, at our work, in our church, for being inherently mean-spirited and not worth compassion or love. Curiosity might pull back the curtain on the story of a father who abused him, a mom who left, older siblings who used him as a scapegoat and no one to protect or defend him. We may be quick to judge the addict, blaming him for his weakness, wondering how hard can it be to just stop or go get help. Curiosity might show us that addiction goes back generations in his family. It might unveil that he lost his dad and his best friend within a matter of months, the pain of his grief so unbearable that nothing else could help him sleep. There is no end to the real and beautiful and painful stories we discover in people's lives when we're curious. Curiosity is a gift. It equips us as individuals to hold space for other people's stories. It draws us together, unlike judgment, which drives us apart. And in a church, curiosity creates a place where people can belong fully to God and fully to one another. Because we don't have to have all the answers. And we can find joy and connection to one another in the not knowing. Will you pray with me? God, you are the God of our unknowing. Your infinite love, your everlasting grace for us are far beyond our comprehension. And so your very nature draws us into curiosity and longing for you. Keep our minds ever open. Keep our questions always humble. Keep our curiosity eager and always bringing us closer to you, to one another, and to this beautiful world you have made. In the name of Jesus, who invites our questions and embraces us with love. Amen.